Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Innovative EdTech. It is lovely to have you here with us. Just give me a moment. I'm just going to pop my face up on the screen because I know you'd love to see me. Welcome. If you have joined us tonight, hoping to join us on YouTube, I am so sorry that the live stream has not connected. My streaming software has let me down again, and it's something that I'm probably going to look at whether or not I stay with this particular service or move to another service. But if you were trying to find us on YouTube tonight and you weren't able to join us, we are on our Facebook page at Evolve EdTech, or I will pop up the recording onto our YouTube channel after the session so that you can catch up on YouTube. So I'm very sorry to say that we aren't streaming live to YouTube tonight, but I will pop the recording up there for us. So thank you for joining us for episode number 18 of Innovative EdTech. Now, if you do ever see me looking from one way to the other, it's because I've got different screens that I'm using to conduct the presentation tonight. So if I look like I'm looking at a completely different angle to you, that is why. Anyway, welcome to episode 18 of Innovative EdTech. Tonight, our top 5 EdTech tools for gamified learning. So we're going to dive into the concept of gamification. What does it mean? How can we use it in the classroom? What can it do to really boost and motivate our students with their learning? So we are going to explore this tonight, and I'm going to share 5 tools that I have used and I think are great tools for gamification in the classroom. So let's dive in and get started with episode 18. All right, if we have not met before, hello, it's lovely to see you. My name is Tristan Heron, and I am the founder and future ready teaching specialist here at Evolve EdTech. It is lovely to meet you. If we've met before, thank you so much for coming back. I am a fully qualified K-12, which is a primary and secondary teacher here in Australia, and I have majors in English and history. So they are the teaching specialities that I teach in high schools, and I am currently a full-time substantive English and history teacher. I have been teaching for over 10 years. I actually think it's about 13 years now, so I might need to update this. And I have taught from kindergarten all the way up to year 12 throughout my career. So I have experience in every single grade that we have here in Australia. So I do have an understanding of both. But as I mentioned, I have been teaching primarily in high schools for most of my teaching career. And if you don't realize it or not, I have an absolutely astoundingly keen interest in educational technology. I love EdTech. I love what it can do to help motivate, inspire, and also create whole new worlds of opportunities for our students. So I have been using EdTech since the very first high school that I taught in, which was way back in 2012. So yeah, about 13 years ago. And this all started and it was all kind of fostered from an introduction to Moodle. So if you are an edtecher from way back, you might know Moodle, you might still be using Moodle. I haven't used Moodle for years because I've moved on to different locations and things like that. But Moodle was what really inspired me to fall in love with educational technology. And here I am, hopefully sharing my knowledge with you so that you can also have fun with EdTech in the classroom. So welcome. I hope you have a fantastic night. If you're joining us for the recording, I hope that you find tonight's episode really useful and inspiring. So let's jump over and have a look at what we are going to explore in this episode. So we are going to look at gamification. So I want to start off by just taking you in and explaining what we mean when we talk about gamified learning. What does it mean? How can we use it? What are some of those key elements and features of gamification just to get those foundations started and in our brains? Then we're going to have a look at some of those key elements. We're going to have a look at some of those reasons why gamification is a valuable tool to use in our classroom. And then we're going to dive in and we're going to explore just 5. Yes, just 5 tonight. I'm normally a big one for giving, but it's only 5 tonight. I'm going to share 5 of my favorite tools for gamified learning. So there's so many out there. All right. I am definitely not the expert in every gamified learning platform that is available, but but I'm going to share 5 tools that I really like tonight and explain to you why I think these are great tools for gamified learning. And then to wrap up, we're just going to talk to you about how you can continue to stay connected with us here at Evolve EdTech. And we are going to introduce and tell you something very special, which has not been shared publicly with anyone from the Evolve EdTech community yet. You are going to be the first people to hear about this. We've got something special to announce later in the episode. So let's get this party started. All right. So, what is gamification and what do we mean when we talk about gamified learning? This is a term that's definitely something that is creeping into our teaching and learning vocabulary at the moment. But what does it actually mean? If I tell you and I ask you, do you use and implement gamified learning in your classroom? Can you actually respond and actually tell me what we mean when we say gamified learning? So let's go and have a look at what we mean about gamification. So, what does gamified learning mean? So, gamified learning is all about taking those elements that make games so engaging and then weaving them into our classrooms. Now, we're not saying that you have to have these big productions, that you have to have spent hundreds of hours on programming. We're looking at how we can take some of those elements from games and gaming. And I'm not just talking about digital gaming and things like PlayStation and Xbox and Nintendo. We're looking at all of those kind of elements when it comes to games. So we're having a look at how we can use these. So as you can see here, we don't need to turn every lesson into a video game. What we're doing is we're going to take some of those best parts of games and gaming to really boost our students' motivation, their participation, and their achievement in the learning activities and processes that you are going to be implementing and using in your classroom. So we are going to go and borrow some of those really amazing elements, implement them into our own classroom to see our students absolutely grow, master the various skills that you're teaching them, and ultimately have fun and really enjoy their learning opportunities. So that's what we mean when we talk about gamified learning. We talk about taking those best elements or those really engaging elements of gaming and popping them into our learning experiences in one way or another. So, what are some of the key elements of gamified learning and gamification in the classroom? So, these are just some of the elements, okay? These are definitely not all of those key elements, but they are some of those elements that you could absolutely think about when it comes to gamified learning in the classroom. Okay, so our first idea just here. Sorry, I'm just going to check something to make sure something is working. If you're joining me on Facebook, I'm just not sure that that's working, but there we go. I think it's just a little bit delayed, but that's okay. That's fine. All right, we'll pop it back there now. Okay. All right. All right. Sorry about that. I'm getting a little bit distracted with things tonight because, when things go to absolute craziness, sometimes I get a little bit overwhelmed. Anyway, so some of the key elements of gamification in learning. So, some of those really significant elements of games include things like points and rewards. We can actually start to incorporate this element into our classrooms with gamified learning. We could have activities where our learners earn points, they might earn badges or tokens or some kind of digital or even physical, it doesn't have to be digital, some kind of token for completing different tasks, answering questions, demonstrating specific skills, etc. So we know that games and gaming is very focused on, you complete something and you get some kind of reward. Well, we can implement that particular aspect in our classrooms and create this sense of achievement and keep our students motivated by continuing to raise that bar so that they have something that they could work towards achieving. So we could use those points and rewards elements of gaming in our classrooms. Another key element includes, oh, that didn't work there. Let's do that. levels and challenges. So we know that every game starts off relatively easy. We might have an elementary, level of something, and slowly they get more challenging as we progress through the game, which is what makes the game exciting and engaging. So we can do this with gamified learning in the classroom. Obviously, as educators, we know that you don't just start off with the essay. All right. If we're writing something or doing something, we need to start off with a modeled example. We might do a, I do, we do, and then eventually you do process, something like that. So our students are mastering the skills that they need to be successful. Well, we can take that exact idea and we can use that in our own classrooms when it comes to gamified learning. So maybe we have challenges. Each challenge builds on the last, okay, continuing to help our students feel that sense of progress, but also making sure that those activities are achievable and exciting. So every level is something different, but it's achievable, it's exciting, it's engaging. It's going to motivate our students to continue to work towards achieving those points and rewards that you might have established for whatever you are doing in the classroom. All right, our next reason, okay, for gamified learning is gamified learning can really increase that competition and collaboration. There is nothing wrong with a bit of healthy competition in the classroom, and collaboration is one of those 21st century skills that we really need to make sure we are incorporating into our learning experiences for the benefit of our students. So, friendly competition, all right, you could have things like leaderboards or time challenges, can not only inspire students to push themselves, but it can also help challenge those students who might be some of our high performing and gifted students. It might even motivate some of our middle or lower ability students to push themselves to achieving and really engaging and mastering those skills even further. So we could also have a look at how we can pair our students together into teams, okay, because we're going to continue to build that collaboration, that problem solving. We're going to have a look at that shared success. So, another key element of gaming here is that competition and collaboration, which we can absolutely incorporate into our classroom environments. Okay, our next key element of gamification in learning, okay, is that idea of choice and agency. So we can actually give our students options. All right. So which part of the challenge are they going to attempt first? First, which path are they going to take? We can actually give them ownership over their learning journey. All right. This might be something that takes a little bit of practice and time to get set up. But once you have set this up, your students will love that agency. Agency is absolutely a powerful motivator when it comes to really encouraging our students to take that next step and find something that works for them. All right, our next key element of gamification in learning is that it can offer instant feedback. Now, we know that feedback is one of those really essential elements when it comes to teaching and learning and growth in our students and even ourselves as educators. So, games thrive on that immediate response, all right? And so does learning. And this is where we can incorporate this element into our own teaching and learning programs and activities. So, whether it's a score, a badge, whatever you decide, it can encourage and motivate our students by providing them with quick feedback, okay, so that they know what they've mastered and what they need to continue to work on. So, feedback is something that is so important that we can also incorporate into our gamification activities in our classrooms. All right, and our final key element of gamification in learning is that we know that games are all about narratives and storytelling. So we can actually place activities within a storyline. All right, so maybe you have some kind of quest, mystery, and adventure, and this is going to help your learners connect emotionally with the content. Storylines, storyline turn tasks into part of a bigger journey, increasing meaning and engagement. So, again, this might take a little bit of time to set up for you, but I can guarantee that no matter what you're teaching, whether you're science or maths or your history or geography or English, whatever you are teaching, you can create some kind of narrative and storytelling gamified activity that your students are really going to connect with. And we are so lucky now that we have AI where we can actually go and get a lot of these things created for us in absolutely, a few seconds, and then we can use those in our own classrooms. So there are just 6 elements of gamification that we can look at incorporating into our classrooms, and we can do this relatively quickly, relatively easily. And we've got some fantastic tools that we're going to share with you tonight where you can start to incorporate some of these elements into your own teaching and learning and your own EdTech toolkit. All right, so let's move on and really have a look and hone in on this idea about why gamification works. Why is gamification something that is valuable? Why is gamification something that is worth considering and adding to our tech toolkit so that we can use it in our classrooms? Because remember, everything that we're doing in our classrooms, it's not for you. All right. We are trying to develop skills with our students. We want them to have the skills. We want them to have the capacities, the competencies, the abilities to be successful in their world once they leave our schooling system. So we want to make sure that what they are learning, what they are doing is relevant, it is fun, it is engaging, it is motivating. It is every single thing that is going to make our students absolutely wonderful, beautiful humans when they move on to whatever they're going to do with their life. So, why does gamification work? Let's jump in and have a look at a couple of reasons why gamification is so valuable and important in the classroom. All right, our first reason why gamification works is that gamification boosts motivation. So, gamification taps into that intrinsic motivation by making learning feel rewarding. Now, we know that our students, they respond to achieving something, they respond to getting something. All right. So, by having something like a reward, something like points or badges, all right, it is going to really motivate our students to keep moving forward. They're going to show that they love learning. They are going to demonstrate that learning is exciting. They are going to really show us that it's not a chore, that learning is something that can be fun and exciting because they have that intrinsic motivation to continue to achieve. So, a really great way and a really great reason why gamification in the classroom is so important. All right, let's have a look at another reason why gamification works in the classroom. Gamification promotes engagement. Yes, it does. All right. If you have ever played any kind of game with a child or even an adult or a teenager, whatever, whoever, wherever, if you played a video game, if you have played some kind of board game, you know that it promotes engagement. It really encourages our young people or anybody. Again, I keep going back to young people because obviously we are talking about students, but gamification and playing those games promotes engagement. So when our students are active participants rather than passive recipients, they're more likely to stay focused. So rather than jumping in here and talking to the kids for 60 minutes and boring the absolute life out of them, why can't we incorporate some kind of gamified element so that they are active in their learning? And I've got some examples later on that I can talk about where I actually tried this. So I don't just make these things up. I do actually try and implement everything that I share with you here at Evolve EdTech before I come in. And I have some really good examples where I actually saw this active participation simply by using one of the 5 tech tools that I'm going to talk about this evening. So, games and game like elements can turn those challenges, puzzles, or adventures that hold attention for our students into something that is going to be enjoyable, not only for yourself, but also engaging for your students. All right, our next reason why does gamification work in the classroom is because it encourages resilience and a growth mindset. Now, these are terms that we hear all the time. We must be resilient. We must have a growth mindset. All right, we've heard these before. You probably still use them, and there's nothing wrong with using those. And it's really important that we encourage our students and really motivate and show them that sometimes by failing, it's actually a chance for us to continue to improve, continue to work on something and get better and better and better. All right. Here I am. I have been creating videos for a number of years now. I have been presenting live streams and I'm still making mistakes. I'm still having problems. We had tech problems at the beginning of the show tonight. Okay. So I have these as well. Does this mean that I'm not going to come back next time for the next episode of Innovative EdTech? Absolutely not. It means that I'm going to come back. Hopefully, I'm going to identify what didn't quite go to plan and make sure that that doesn't happen next time. Sometimes these things are out of my control, but I'm going to try my absolute best. So, gamification, it encourages resilience and that growth mindset. So, we know in games, failure isn't final. It's just a chance to try again. All right. So if you've ever played a game, if you played a game of Monopoly, all right, you know that sometimes you aren't going to win, that you are going to lose dismally. You might accidentally die and have to come back and use one of your many lives that you might have accumulated. But we know that this isn't the end. All right. Whenever you're playing a game and something happens, you're not going to be sent right back to the start necessarily and have to work on completing all of those missions and challenges and levels again. All right. So applying the various skills that our students have learned from your particular class allows our students to take those risks, to learn from their mistakes, but also to develop persistence. We know that learning doesn't just happen. We need to actually practice, practice, practice. Okay, it is that rote learning in a way, if you want to call it that still, that we need to actually make sure that we are, using so that we are actually developing those skills. Skills take time, okay? Some people just have natural abilities to do something. Other people need a little bit of time, but that comes with that persistence. So gamification provides our students with that comfortable way of failing forward. All right. So we are able to do something. We're able to incorporate some of those gamification elements, but we're able to do that in a safe, effective, supportive way that encourages that resilience as well as that growth mindset. All right. Our next reason why gamification works in the classroom is that it is a great way to support differentiation. Now, we know that we have a myriad of different student learning abilities in our classrooms. That is just a given, all right? You can have a huge range. I have many classes this year, and I can tell you that I go from the very bottom to all the way up to the top, potentially high performing and gifted students. So you will have these in your classrooms. So gamification is a great way to support differentiation. Gamified tasks can be designed with multiple entry points, difficulty levels, and even choice pathways. All right. So we actually have a lot of flexibility with a lot of the tools that we have available to us to support those differentiated entries, pathways, choices for our students. Now, this flexibility helps meet the diverse learning needs of our students, allowing them to progress at their own pace, allowing them to be the leaders, to take that agency, to move forward to the next step when they are comfortable and confident with whatever they have completed, whatever skill they have mastered, whatever they have been doing in the classroom. Okay, let's move on to our next reason why gamification works. All right, we've talked about this one. Gamification, it provides that instant feedback. So our students don't need to wait forever to get that information and that feedback back to you. They can get it through quick feedback, through scores, badges. There might be progress indicators. There could be a number of different ways that we are providing feedback to them. All right, a number of these tools that we're going to look at tonight can actually provide written answers or feedback to our students instantly so that they are able to see why their particular answer was correct or why the particular answer was incorrect. So this helps our students reflect as well as adjust immediately and maybe think about what they need to do moving forward. So gamification definitely helps provide instant feedback with our students. All right, the next reason is that gamification builds collaboration and social connection. Now, we did allude to this in the previous slide, all right, when we talked about teamwork and collaboration, and absolutely. Many of those gamified activities that we might use involve teamwork, friendly competition. Okay, we can also have that peer to peer support. We can create a positive classroom culture. And it is something that I really promote when I use gamified learning in my classroom. I know that I have students in my year 8 class this year who will verbally, just say what they're thinking when someone chooses the wrong answer or somebody does something. And that's a really great opportunity for me to talk to the class about making sure that we are respectful. Just because someone got that particular answer wrong doesn't mean that they didn't know the answer. They might have accidentally clicked the wrong response. They might have misread the question. Heck, I've misread questions many times when I have been participating in gamified learning in my classrooms with my students. So this is a really great way. Gamification is a really great way to build that collaboration as well as that social connection and having a look at some of those social skills. All right, and our final reason why gamification works in the classroom is that we can link those real world skills that we need our students to possess to the various activities that we are completing. So, those problem solving, decision making, strategy, and creative thinking skills that we all need to learn and develop can be naturally embedded in our gamified learning tasks, where our students can practice these skills whilst also engaging with the content that you are teaching. So we are embedding these skills, providing our students with the opportunity to practice these skills, but we're doing it in a way that is engaging, motivating, inspiring, collaborative, all of those different elements that are going to make gamification and gamified learning so successful in the classroom. So there we go. There is just seven. What have we got? Three, four, five, six, seven. I can count. There we go. All right. 7 reasons why gamification works in the classroom. And as I mentioned, I can tell you that I have implemented and tried a little bit more gamification this year. I tried something new, which is one of the tools I'm going to share with you tonight. And I actually had a comment from a student, and that particular student actually said that they loved this because they had that agency, they had that control over working through the activities. So I'll talk to you a little bit about that when we get up to that tool very soon. But absolutely, gamification is a great tool to use in the classroom. All right, so we are on to the fun part. Okay, so let's jump in. We're going to have a look at 5 tools, just 5 tonight. You know that I'm normally a very big oversharer, but we're just going to focus on 5 because I just want to introduce these to you tonight so that you can go and perhaps investigate these and see if they would be right for your EdTech toolkit. All right, I always emphasize I'm not here telling you that you should be using these tools. I am just presenting these tools to you and encouraging you to explore them, see if they work with your particular students and context. All right. I want you to make that decision. I'm just here to share information with you. Okay. And I want you to make that decision. Let me just have a quick drink of water. I have been a little bit sick lately and my throat is a little bit sore still, so just need to lubricate that up a little bit. All right, so let's jump in. So as I mentioned, we are going to share 5 tools. I have used all of these tools, so I can actually confirm that these are tools that I have tested and tried with my students. And I will tell you a few things as we go through them because definitely a couple of them surprised me and surprised me in a good way. And I'm going to talk to you about that shortly. So tonight is all just to kind of it's a lecture type episode. There's no demonstrations tonight because I want you to go and do that yourself. And we wouldn't have time to go through all 5 tools tonight in 60 minutes. So that is up to you to go and investigate these tools yourself. I'm just here merely to present them to you. So what we're going to do is I'm going to tell you about the tools, give you a little bit of an overview. We are going to provide some pros and cons for each of those tools, some of those positives and negatives, so that you have those. It is not an exhaustive list at all, so do not think that just because there's only a few dot points that they are the only positives and only negatives that we might associate with each of these tools. We're just going to share a couple of those with you. And we're also going to share some practical ways that you could actually use these tools in your classroom. So we've got 6 examples on how you could use these tools in your classroom. And we've got examples from both primary and secondary schooling contexts. So let's dive into our very first tool that we're going to share with you tonight. And it is one of the tools that has actually surprised me in 2025. And let me explain why. All right, our very first tool is one that I dare say you know and have used many times before, and that is Kahoot. Kahoot is an oldie but a goodie, and it is something that surprisingly my kids in some of my classes have actually requested to use and play this year. I did notice for a little bit throughout my career, I remember using Kahoot way back in 2013, maybe even earlier. I do remember a bit of time where every single teacher was using Kahoot and it was starting to lose its effectiveness. And the students were just like, oh, Kahoot, not again. But as I just mentioned, in a couple of my classes, it has actually been the tool that the students have requested to use when we have been looking at some games. So Kahoot is my first tool that we are going to look at tonight. All right, if you have not heard of Kahoot before, that's okay. There's no problems with that. But Kahoot is a game based learning platform where teachers and educators create multiple choice quizzes that students answer in real time. Features include quizzes, polls, puzzles, word clouds. There's Kahoot challenges, and our students can even complete Kahoots at their own pace. So once upon a time, we had to have our Kahoots live in the classroom because the teacher needed to actually facilitate this throughout their own device. But now with Kahoot and the evolution of our learning from home period with COVID, we've actually seen Kahoot transform into a completely new program where we can not only have it live in a classroom, but our students can work on a Kahoot at the same time. Now, it's really interesting that this description here just talks about multiple choice quizzes. I can definitely tell you that you can do much more with Kahoot now, not just multiple choice. Once upon a time, it was just multiple choice. You can definitely, there's a little bit more feature and functionality in Kahoot these days than there was when I started using it many, many years ago. So let's have a look at just a couple, and as I mentioned, it's just a few of the positives and negatives when it comes to Kahoot. Right, as I mentioned, the very first one here, Kahoot is engaging, fun, and competitive. All right. It can cause an absolute ruckus in your classroom if you've got some very engaged and very motivated students. They can get very loud, they can get very intense, but it is exciting. It is fun. It is that competition. It is just an atmosphere that sometimes you might need as an educator as well. You need that little boost to see that your students actually are engaging with your particular content. So it can be very engaging. It's fun and competitive. Now, Kahoot is also relatively easy to use across our different devices. All right, it's easy. We just log into a website. Okay, we can also use a variety of different tools. If you've got laptops, tablets, iPads, okay, mobile phones, you can use any of those. It's really super simple and flexible to use across those different devices that you might have in the classroom. All right, another reason why Kahoot is fantastic is it can provide immediate feedback to your students. So we can provide that feedback through our responses. You could also, as a teacher, and it's something that I have definitely done many times myself, is I might talk to the students about their responses, about, how many students selected option A, B, C, D, and maybe just start to identify why they thought that particular answer was correct or why that particular answer was incorrect. So you can actually have that immediate feedback being generated and shared with your students when they're playing Kahoot. And it can also be used live or asynchronous. Yeah, I can't say that word. It's definitely not a word that I can say. Asynchronously. No, I give up. I give up. Okay, I definitely am not a proficient at every word in the English language. I don't even know if I could speak then. I had a lot of problems with that today. It was funny. But yes, we can use it live. We can have our students working on something themselves in their own time. All right, that's the great thing about Kahoot. It is so flexible now compared to when it was, first launching and we had to have it in the classroom as a live activity. It has evolved significantly, which is fantastic to see. All right, let's move over to some of the negatives. All right, now there are a few negatives here. Again, this is only a very small list. I would say that there might be more negatives that might come to light here, but don't take that as being a reason why you shouldn't explore this tool. All right, definitely jump in and have a look at Kahoot if you haven't used it before or it's been a number of years since you used Kahoot because it is a fantastic tool. All right, our first negative is that some students may feel pressured by time limits. So, yes, you have that control when you set up your games in Kahoot. You can decide how many seconds or minutes a particular question is available for students before they are timed out. All right. And some students might actually feel that it is too much pressure. All right. And they might select the wrong answers just because they want to make sure they choose something. So it is definitely a negative just there. All right, another negative here with Kahoot, and this will be very similar to every single one of these tools that we are going to share with you tonight, is we do require an internet connection. It is pretty much a given today that all of those tools that we are using require some form of internet or data connection. So Kahoot is no different. All right, it definitely requires an internet connection. All right, our last point here when it comes to negatives is that just like every tool, Kahoot does have its free version and its paid versions. Okay. And I did say paid versions because there are a number of different versions of Kahoot available for different clientele, not just education and school leaders and teachers and educators. All right. They do have plans for other types of industries that might like to use Kahoot, but your free version does have limitations. All right. I am a paid, or I have been a paid subscriber of Kahoot in the past. I'm no longer a paid subscriber. I chose not to renew my subscription because obviously as teachers we subscribe to everything and it costs us a lot of money in the end. So I'm no longer a paid subscriber, which does make it really hard to create new Kahoots because I'm limited with what I can do. And also, even just going to find other random Kahoots that we might be able to play in class is also much more challenging when it comes to the free version. So there's a couple of positives and negatives. I definitely love Kahoot. I still use Kahoot. It is part of my EdTech toolkit. It is going to stay part of my EdTech toolkit. But there's just some things I want you to think about when it comes to Kahoot. All right, let's have a look at some different ways that you could use Kahoot in the classroom. Okay, maybe you are a primary maths teacher or you have a primary class. You could quite easily use a Kahoot game for a quick fire times table race. Okay, so you might have completed those timetables activities in class previously. Why not make it digital now and pop a Kahoot on so that our students are able to, you know, do that same process, but now we're actually doing it using a digital tool like Kahoot. All right, our next reason, maybe you are a history teacher. We could have a revision quiz on the causes of World War One. Right? Maybe you have some sources, some images, you might have some quotes. There are so many things that you can do with Kahoot for a quick revision quiz to get our students motivated and get them revising their learning and knowledge. All right, our next one is maybe we are teaching some English with our students. We could do some vocabulary practice, maybe with some picture prompts, okay, especially if maybe you're using this for some of the lowest, the lower kids in the younger years. You might be able to create some kind of vocabulary exercise using a picture or some pictures so that your students are able to engage with that. Okay, another example here is we're going back to high school and maybe you're a science teacher. You might have some different parts of a cell or the periodic table, and you are asking your students to identify them. Again, getting them to check their understanding, to showcase their knowledge through gamification in the classroom. Okay, maybe you are a PE teacher, a health teacher. We might be able to have some kind of health and nutrition quiz. Okay, so maybe you've been studying that. Maybe you've been looking at, healthy life as a teenager. You might be able to create some kind of quiz in Kahoot to check your students' understanding. And our final example here is maybe we're having some kind of cross-curricular, or maybe it's an end of term or semester or unit kind of revision activity. We could have a revision tournament. How cool would that be? Having some kind of activity that looks at whatever units you've studied this year and really bringing that information back to the forefront of our minds so our students can revise and re-implement some of that learning that they have had. So there are 6 very simple ways that we could use Kahoot. All right, it is a fantastic tool, and it's a fantastic tool that we could definitely use as a pre and a post test if we're doing something with our students. So Kahoot, a really great tool if you're wanting to get started with EdTech and you're wanting to get started with gamification. It is absolutely a tool that I think should be, something that we can pop into our EdTech toolkit. All right, this screen here is just a screenshot of the Kahoot website at the time of recording. So you can see, as I mentioned, there are different kind of programs and there are different subscription-based elements that you can join here. Okay, one thing that is a little bit overwhelming is there are lots of options when it comes to paid plans for Kahoot. So you might just start off with the basic plan. They do often have specials, so keep an eye out for those so that you can get the best bang for your buck. All right, let's move on to our second wonderful gamified learning tool, and this is one of my favorites as well, and it's something that I have really started to play with this year, and it is Wayground. If you have not heard of Wayground, you might know Wayground as quizzes. All right, so quizzes has evolved into Wayground, and it is a fantastic, powerful tool that I think you will absolutely love. So let's jump in and have a look at Wayground. All right, so Wayground, formerly Quizzes, is similar to Kahoot, but it allows students to progress at their own pace. I will actually caveat that by saying you can actually have a live leaderboard and do a few other live things now to really, really, really engage your students with that gamified learning. So we can have that leaderboard. We can use things like memes, power-ups. We have detailed reports. It is a fantastic tool. And this is actually the tool where the student I mentioned earlier on, they actually said to me that they really enjoyed using Wayground for the particular learning activity that I was implementing. And I was actually getting my students to complete some activities on the 8 parts of speech. So they might have been doing something on nouns or adjectives or adverbs or something. But one of my students actually mentioned that they loved this particular type of learning. So I took that as a big win because this was a new tool to me. This was something that I had not actually tried and implemented myself, but it was fantastic to get that feedback from one of my students. All right, let's have a look at some of the positives and negatives. Okay, some of the positives. Wayground can be self-paced, okay, with less time pressures. So we talked about time pressures with Kahoot. This is self-paced, which allows our students to, really look at the answers and options and start to think about what they're doing so that they can showcase their learning and knowledge. Wayground is also great for homework or practice, okay? That's what I was doing With my particular case, we were practicing what we had just learned and revised about the 8 parts of speech, and now I was testing my students' understanding. All right, there are a wide array of question types in Wayground. We can have multiple choice, open-ended, we can have polls. There are so many wonderful tools and wonderful question types that you can use in Wayground. We can keep the fun really high and we can increase that engagement because we can actually use memes in Wayground. We can have a little bit of fun, all right? We don't have to just be static and boring. We can create a really visual, powerful learning activity that our students are going to love. And just like I mentioned with Kahoot, we can absolutely use Wayground as a pre and post assessment tool if you would like to collect some data and some information to see what your students have done and achieved. All right, some of the negatives here, and again, we could say that this first dot point here applies to every single tool that I'm going to share with you tonight, and that is that sometimes these tools are overused. All right, and that's what I mentioned about Kahoot. I thought Kahoot had been overused quite significantly, that I stopped kind of using it as a primary tool and kept it in my EdTech toolkit as a backup. But sometimes this happens, and maybe in your particular context or school, Wayground is something that is used by multiple teachers, and the effectiveness of that can actually start to lag. So just be aware of that. Another negative is that it requires strong question design for depth. Again, it does, but you can actually now go and use any one of those wonderful AI tools that we have available for us to create those questions so that, we can have that progression, that idea of starting off really simple, entry level, basic, and progressing as our questions get more challenging through the activity. That's quite easy to do now with AI. Okay, let's have a look at some examples because I know we are going to run out of time, and you know that I do this all the time. So we're going to try and progress through this a little bit quicker because remember, I do have a wonderful surprise to share with you. Again, I'm getting distracted. I do this all the time. All right, so what are some of the different ways that we could use and implement Wayground in our classroom? Okay, the first one here. Maybe you are a primary school teacher, you're teaching some kind of geography. We can have a naming countries and capitals activity. Okay, so we could definitely have some different visuals in there. Maybe we've even got some flags, okay, so that we can actually get our students to show us what they know about various countries and capital cities. All right, another example here is maybe you are a maths teacher. All right, we can have some algebra practice. And the great thing about Wayground is that we can actually have an instant response to let our students know why they got an answer incorrect. There's lots of differentiation tools in Wayground, which make it a fantastic tool if you need that particular focus. So you might create an activity where we've got some algebra practice using Wayground. All right, our next idea here, again, maybe we're teaching science in our primary school systems, and maybe we're looking at the plant life cycle, or maybe we're looking at adaptations of plants and things like that. We can create a wonderful game and a wonderful learning experience for our students using Wayground. All right, it is something that you can do, and it is something that your students will absolutely love. All right, maybe you are an English teacher. I am an English teacher, as I mentioned earlier, and I might have just some activities testing my students of literary devices and seeing if they can identify those. I might have some definitions, I might have some examples, and I might be getting my students to show me their understanding. And then I'm using that information that I am provided to see what particular techniques maybe our students need to work on so that they can identify those and use those in their own learning. Okay, maybe you are a language teacher, okay? You could have vocabulary drills. Maybe you're a French teacher, an Indonesian teacher, all right? You can start to really incorporate these vocabulary drills with EdTech in the classroom using Wayground, all right? All of these ideas, I hope you're seeing that they're actually not big and complicated, and you can actually start to do these today, all right? Really simply creating wonderful tools and wonderful activities that you can use with your students. One second, I do need a drink of water. And our final example for Wayground is that we might again have some kind of cross curricular formative assessment check in, especially if maybe you're a primary school teacher where this is much easier, or maybe you're teaching some kind of subject in high school where you can actually have that check in across different subjects or topics or different things that you've been doing in the classroom. So there are 6 very simple examples of how we could use Wayground to use this tool as a form of gamified learning. And this is what Wayground looks like right now. So if you're used to quizzes, all right, this is the new look website. Okay, if you still go to quizzes, it will take you to this website. So go and check it out. It is absolutely free for teachers to use. It's a wonderful tool, and I really encourage you to investigate if it's something that you can pop into your EdTech toolkit. Okay, let's move on to tool number 3 because I am mindful that we are running short on time as usual. All right, the next one is Blue Kit. Okay, Blue Kit. I love Blue Kit. All right, it is definitely a tool that I think is one that if I'm going to, suggest any of them, Blue Kit is one of them. And this is why I think it is a tool that you should look at using in the classroom. So, BlueKit combines quiz-based questions with fun game modes. Okay, BlueKit is a great one. All right, I love it. I was introduced to this a couple of years ago, and I think it's a really fun activity and a fun tool to use. So, what you do is you create sets of questions, or you might access one of the pre-made sets of questions, and then you have your students provided with a time period, and your students answer those questions. Basically, they unlock points or rewards, and you have an ultimate winner at the end. Essentially, what they do is they just cycle through the questions over and over and over, which is great if you're trying to get your students to become familiar with a particular topic or concept. And they just continue to work through those, doing whatever they need to do in order to be successful so that they can be the ultimate champion at the end. There's a number of different modes. There's tower defense, there's cafe, not my favorites, but there's a whole array of wonderful game modes that you can use. All right, some of the positives for BlueKit. All right, it is highly engaging. Okay, when I started using this with some of my Year 7 literacy students a few years ago, it is competitive. It was definitely something that just blew the roof off with motivation and engagement. So it is absolutely something that you could use for that. Here we go. It is competitive and collaborative. So, absolutely competitive, collaborative. We can have different types of game modes and different types of students and activities and things like that. So, it is definitely exciting and motivating and competitive and collaborative if you're looking for a tool that does all of those things. And it's really simple and easy to customize or use those existing sets. It's very simple, which is great because you don't want a tool that is complicated to get started with, and you can really get started with BlueKit very quickly. Okay, some of the negatives. All right, because it is so motivating, it is so competitive, it is so engaging, sometimes your students may focus on game strategy over content. So they might just be clicking and doing things really fast rather than taking the time to read the questions and take in the information and showcase their learning. So sometimes that focus on strategy over content might be something that your students demonstrate. All right, some of the game modes are locked behind the premium version. I do not pay for BlueKit. Okay, so I definitely am limited with the game modes, but the game modes you can get with the free version are fantastic and definitely worth it. And definitely this last point here, we talked about how Wayground and even Kahoot can get a little bit overused. It can actually get a little bit boring with BlueKit if you are playing it continuously. It is not a game or a set of games that you're going to play for an hour straight because it does get quite repetitive and boring, and your student participation will drop off. Trust me, I know. Okay, I have tried this because sometimes you just want to play games because you've had a long day, or your students need a bit of a mental break as well. So just be aware that you do actually need to be strategic with when and how you use Bluekit. All right, so what are some of the ways that we could use Bluekit in the classroom? Okay, again, maybe if we are teaching English in a primary school setting, we could have some spelling practice. Maybe you're spelling words for the week, or maybe you've got some vocab for a particular unit. We could use the tower defense mode, which is not one of my favorites, but maybe you could use that to create some kind of competition that you use with your students to really hone in on that spelling or vocabulary practice. Okay, maybe you're a secondary biology science teacher, and maybe you are just doing some kind of revision, and you might do that with Gold Quest. Okay, I don't mind Gold Quest. Yes, I have played this many times before. Gold Quest is a nice, simple one. Okay, and a great one if you are wanting to conduct some revision activities at the end of a unit or term or semester with your students. Okay, again, another maths example here. Maybe we're looking at fractions, okay, and maybe we're using cafe mode. I don't mind cafe mode. It's not my favorite, but it is a really fun one where we have to feed people. It's also really great because we need to see how much stock we kind of need to have, what we need to buy. So it's actually a really good one if we're looking at maths. So we might be using it for some fractions. Okay, maybe if we're a geography teacher in a high school, we're using the factory game mode for some kind of map knowledge activity. Okay, so maybe we're looking at different symbols or different language associated with maps and how we can, really hone in on our students' knowledge and understanding. Okay, maybe we are a HISI teacher, and that means human society in its environment here in Australia. Maybe we're looking at symbols and facts related to Australia or global history. We could be using our Bluekit activities and game modes to really hone in and engage our students with this particular concept. And our final example here, another PDHPE example, we might use it to really explore those body parts, those body systems that we are looking at in PDHPE through a wonderful game of Bluekit. So there's 6, again, very simple ways that we could use this tool to really boost that motivation, that competition, that engagement, okay, so that our students are showcasing their learning through a completely different mode of learning. We're not just talking, we're not writing, we're not just answering something. We're showcasing it through EdTech, we're showcasing it through gamification. Okay, let's move on to our 4th tool tonight. Oh, sorry, that's just the screenshot of Bluekit there. It's very simple. It is Bluekit. Okay, so that's, I love how they've got the pronunciation there. So Bluekit. All right. It's a weird one to say, but it is a really great tool to use and investigate for your classroom. All right, tool number 4. Tool number 4 is definitely one of the tools that I think should be in your EdTech toolkit. I think I've said that for every tool so far tonight, but there is one major difference between Bamboozle and every other tool that we've looked at tonight. So tonight, let's look at Bamboozle, and it is one of my favorite tools. Okay, so what is Bamboozle? Bamboozle is a simple online game platform where teachers create or use existing question banks and students play in teams to answer questions. Instead of fancy graphics, it uses a fun grid-style game board with points and challenges. It works on any device. It requires no student accounts or devices, and it is great for whole class play. So this is why I love Bamboozle. You only need one device, and that's normally the teacher device, which is projected to the students up on the, MLD, smartboard, whiteboard, whatever you're using. Your students don't need accounts. They also don't need devices. So good if you have found, and I have found before, that sometimes devices get, they're difficult to find. Our students don't have them. They're not charged. There's a whole myriad of reasons why all of those wonderful EdTech tools that we've talked about, the required devices, can actually be quite challenging in the classroom. Well, Bamboozle is going to blow those away because it actually doesn't require devices for our students. All right, so let's have a look at some positives and negatives of Bamboozle. All right, some of our positives: it is very easy to set up and play. All right, it is super simple, and you can create a Bamboozle game very quickly. And again, my tip here is I use ChatGPT myself to create my questions so that I can, very quickly create something for my students to use. Bamboozle encourages collaboration and teamwork. All right, so you can have teams, you might have pre created teams, you might get your students to self select their teams, but it definitely encourages collaboration and teamwork. All right, Bamboozle does have a wide library of ready made games, which saves you a truckload of time. I have used them many times. I have even gone in and, to check if there's something already created before I create something myself. And the great thing is that you can actually edit most of the pre made games that have been created. So if you find something on a text or a topic that you like, you can take that, you can edit that, add more questions, change it, etc. All right, Bamboozle works well even with one classroom device and a projector. That's all you need. Trust me. Okay, it is all you need. And Bamboozle is good for revision, warm ups, brain breaks, and I can confirm it is a fantastic tool to use if you've got a few moments to fill. Bamboozle is so simple because again, all you need is that one teacher device. Okay, some of the negatives when it comes to Bamboozle, and I can tell you, honestly, there's not a great deal of negatives, okay? Bamboozle's a fantastic tool and one of my favorite tools. But with Bamboozle, we do have less individual accountability because our students are working together in teams, okay? It might be pairs, but our students don't necessarily have that accountability. You'll often find if they're in teams of 3 or 4, you'll have 1 or 2 students who are really active in participating, and then you'll have those students who are really quiet and reserved. So we don't have that accountability necessarily being exhibited with Bamboozle. All right, there are limited features in the free version. I do pay for Bamboozle, so I will actually just make that very clear. It is one of the few tools that I do pay for and I continue to pay for. But yes, the features are limited in the free version. The paid version is not that expensive. So if you think this is a tool that you might like to use, definitely investigate that particular option there. And honestly, Bamboozle is fairly simple compared to Kahoot or Bluekit. All right, so don't expect big kind of amazing things. It is simple, but sometimes that simplicity is what makes a tool a fantastic resource for you to use in the classroom. So I wouldn't say that these negatives are necessarily reasons why you shouldn't investigate Bamboozle, but it is definitely something that is, you need to be mindful of if you are going to use this tool. Okay, let's have a look at some different ways that we could use Bamboozle in the classroom. Okay, maybe you are again in the English classroom in a primary school. We want to do some vocab practice, right? So you could create a Bamboozle game where your teams define, use, or act out new spelling words. Now, this is another wonderful benefit of Bamboozle. Your students don't just have to verbally speak and share an answer. Okay, maybe they have to draw something, maybe they have to dance or act it out. Okay, there's so many different ways where your students are actually going to be able to demonstrate and respond to a particular question or prompt. So maybe you are having a look at some of those new spelling words and you're getting your students to showcase their understanding in one form or another. Okay, maybe you are a secondary history teacher and you would like to have some kind of quick fire revision activity. Okay, so maybe you've got some key dates, events, people, all these different things that might be in an exam or an assessment that your students are going to then use to revise on a particular topic. And what I do love here is if you go into Bamboozle yourself and you can create these quizzes, you can just reuse them over and over again and just update and adjust them as you want. So it's kind of like make them once and use them as many times as you need to, which is great because it's not quick. It's not quick. It's not difficult, and it's very quick to jump in and edit those. Okay, our next example here is maybe we are teaching some science in primary school and we just want to do a quick topic checkup, okay, where our students, excuse me, answer some questions maybe about the water cycle, maybe some simple machines, habitats. Okay, there's a whole array of different things that we can get our students to look at, and we can get them to do that in teams. Okay, our next example of how we could use Bamboozle in the classroom is maybe we are a maths teacher. Again, we have some problem solving activities, maybe some algebra, some geometry. It could be anything. Don't just think that these are the only ways that you can use Bamboozle. There are so many different ways. Maybe you have some kind of scenario, all right? So many ways that you can get your students to solve problems in teams if you are a mathematics teacher. Okay, maybe you're teaching languages. Okay, and again, we can just have some Bamboozle activities where we match different words, vocab terms with meanings. Maybe we get our students to translate phrases, identify correct grammar forms. Whatever language you are teaching, there is one way or another that you can incorporate that into a Bamboozle quiz. And our final example is, again, maybe we've got some kind of cross-curricular activity here. We could use it for icebreakers, brain breaks, okay? There are so many simple ways that we can use Bamboozle, all right? And if I'm going to suggest any tool, and I know I keep saying that I'm repeating myself, but this is the one tool that is definitely going to be the most simplistic and easiest to use in any classroom at any time. All right. It is a perfect tool for a quick 5-minute game, a quick revision game, a check-in game, a rapid fire game, whatever you want to do. Bamboozle is your go-to. All right, this is the current homepage of Bamboozle, all right, as of tonight, the 17th of September. All right, so you can jump in there. All right, you can join for free, as I mentioned, or you can come up here and have a look at the pricing options. I say go for it. And as I mentioned, I am a paid subscriber because I think it is a tool that is something, and I use it a lot, okay? I definitely use and incorporate this into my classrooms. Okay, let's move on to our final tool that we're going to suggest tonight. And you're probably going to go, Tristan, how can you say that Google Forms can be considered a tool for gamified learning? Well, guess what? I am going to tell you right now because I know that somebody is probably thinking this. So, Google Forms is my final suggestion for gamified learning in the classroom. So even though Google Forms isn't a gaming platform, with a little bit of creativity, a little bit of assistance from ChatGPT, Google Forms can actually become an interactive, challenge-based platform where we can bring in many of those gamification elements. So we need to think outside the box here. We need to think about how we could use this particular tool, which we probably have used before. And again, if you're not using a Google School, Microsoft Forms would be perfectly fine with this as well. So Google Forms is obviously a free tool for creating surveys, quizzes, and even interactive tasks. We can use a variety of different features. We can have multiple choice questions, short answer. We can have branching questions, which is fantastic if you want to create that kind of gamified activity. We can have images and videos. We can also have the quizzes and activities using Google Forms being self-marking. All right, we could create digital escape rooms. We can have branching storylines if we want to have our students involved in a choose their own adventure type activity. There are so many ways that we can use Google Forms and incorporate some different gamification into the classroom. Okay, so let's have a quick look at some of the positives of Google Forms. All right, it is free and easy to use if you are a Google Workspace school. Okay, it is a fantastic tool. Obviously, it integrates smoothly with our Google Workspace ecosphere, which is fantastic. It does support automatic marking and feedback, okay, which is great if you want to provide your students with information and assistance to help them progress. Again, starting from the very early entry level kind of activities and progressing as we move forward. We can have those branching activities that allow our students to choose their own adventures. And I'm actually right now thinking about a potential workshop that we might have in the future, having a look at how we can create some of those choose your own adventures for different subjects. So even I am here right now presenting to you, thinking about what I could do and what we could do here at Evolve EdTech to help you with this. And the great thing about Google Forms is it's obviously accessible across all devices, okay, especially if we have access to the internet. Again, we can use it if we don't have internet, but it's complicated, so let's not go there. All right, some of the negatives of Google Forms. Obviously, it is not going to look like a traditional game. So just keep that up here in your brain hole. It is not going to look like a traditional game. All right, a very important thing to remember here. All right, it can take a little bit of time to design those engaging gamified experiences. So it might be a little bit tricky. I definitely know that I have recently played around with some escape rooms. Escape rooms are great with Google Forms, but they do need a little bit of time allocated towards those so that you can actually get them to work how you would like to. So it might take you a little bit of time to kind of get to the point you would like to get. So don't think that this is a quick, I'm going to be able to jump into Google Forms today and create some kind of interactive gamified activity. And, there is limited customization for visuals and design when it comes to Google Forms. So we're not going to be creating anything big and flashy. Okay. We're just going to be sticking to the features and functions that are available in Google Forms. But don't take these as being absolute negatives and reasons why you can't use Google Forms, because I think that it is a fantastic tool that you can use to create some wonderful gamified learning type activities in your classroom. Okay, so let's have a look at some different ways that we could use Google Forms. Okay, again, we might create something for the English classroom where we're having some kind of spelling quest. We might create a journey where our students answer spelling questions to unlock the next level. So we have some kind of validated response which moves them on to the next level. Great if we're going from those very easy words up to those harder words. A spelling quest. That's so cool. Okay, again, maybe if you're a history teacher, you might decide to design an escape room. Okay, looking at something like World War One or the Cold War or something like that. Okay, again, it might take a little bit of time to create an escape room, but I can tell you that I think your students would absolutely love that. Okay, maybe you are again a maths teacher and we've got some kind of challenge pathway activity. So we're using branching here so that different answers move to different questions or different stages, okay, so that our students are able to master different skills and abilities. Okay, maybe you're a secondary science teacher and maybe we've got a virtual lab investigation. Again, we're focusing on that branching to conduct an experiment. Okay, but this time we're using Google Forms. All right, so it is definitely something that you could consider in the classroom. Okay, maybe we have some kind of revision treasure hunt. Maybe we have QR codes around the school linked to different sections of the Google form. All right, you could make this kind of an amazing race type thing, getting our students involved and active. All right, a really great way to use Google Forms. Or maybe again, we've got a language, we're a language teacher and we want to develop our students' ability to start becoming more familiar with whatever language we are teaching. We might be having a choose your own adventure story. Okay, so we might use that branching again so that our students can do things like picking dialogue, really focusing on the final outcome. So 6 simple ways that we could use Google Forms for gamified learning in the classroom. Definitely something that you should not write off. Google Forms can definitely be used for gamification in the classroom. And this particular screenshot here is actually an example of a Google form that I created for a Innovative EdTech workshop last year. You can actually head back to our YouTube channel and check out that particular episode. And all of these sample Google Forms that we created are actually available for you to have a look at, and you can copy those if you'd like to use those. So that is an example there. You can definitely see how the formatting is quite simple, all right? But again, don't write it off. You can actually use Google Forms in the classroom for gamified learning. All right, let's very quickly, we're going to wrap it up because we are definitely over time. But here are 4 key takeaways for tonight. All right, I want you to think about these when it comes to gamified learning and finding those tools that are going to work for you. All right, so the very first thing that we need to do is make sure that we know the purpose of our tool. So we need to choose those game elements that are going to enhance, not just make things a little bit more fun. We need to enhance the learning. We need to enhance what we're doing so that our students are going to take something away from it. So don't just choose something because it looks, flashy and interesting. Make sure that you choose that particular tool so that it enhances learning. Okay, balance is key. We've talked about this many, many times tonight. We need to keep that competition friendly. We need to make sure that everywhere is collaborative. We need to make sure that it is going to be something that is fulfilling and rewarding and motivating, but we need to make sure that we balance that out. Don't overuse a particular tool, spread them around, use some different tools, take some breaks. You don't need to use gamification every day, right? Because balance is key. All right, number 1. Number 3, start simple. All right, begin with low prep tools before building bigger game-based lessons. So you might just start off with a Bamboozle because it is really simple to go with. Then you might move to Kahoo or Wayground or BlueKit, and then you might, decide that you want to create an escape room using Google Forms. So start off with something really simple first if you're really not that familiar with EdTech and gamification and things like that, and then progressively implement and try something new and a little bit more innovative. Okay, and our final key takeaway for tonight when it comes to using gamification is that it should be student-centered. So adapt gamification to suit different abilities, interests, and learning needs. All right, and this is super simple if you are using something like Google Classroom and your tool integrates with Google Classroom, because you could create different versions of the activities and then you could assign those to specific students or specific groups so that you are really adapting those games and that gamification to suit the different abilities, interests, and learning needs of the students in your class. So there's just 4 key takeaways. Make sure you think about the purpose first. Make sure that balance is key. Start simple and make sure that it is always student-centered. Woo! We made it. What a night. I really always think we're not going to have enough content for an hour, and I always run over time. So if you are still here with me, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I hope you've really started to see that the 5 tools that we have presented to you tonight are 5 fantastic tools that I think you should investigate and see if you might decide to add them to your EdTech toolkit. As I've mentioned, I have used all 5 tools, so I'm not just here saying things and sharing things that, aren't true. I've used all 5 tools and I still will continue to use all 5 tools. Again, I'm very careful. I'm very selective. I make sure it's right for my particular needs and context and students. So I make sure that I am trying to incorporate gamification where possible and when possible. So I hope you have taken something away and you are going to go out and start to see how you can actually incorporate gamification into your teaching and learning activities. Well, let's finish up and wrap up tonight's episode. Okay, so we would love for you to stay connected with us after we finish here very shortly. You can head over to our Evolve EdTech website, evolveedtech.com. If you haven't done so, we would love it if you head over to YouTube and you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Evolve EdTech. Give this video a thumbs up, give us all the nice stuff so that we can continue to inspire and motivate other educators when it comes to educational technology. All right, we'd love it if you joined us on Facebook, Instagram, we're on TikTok. Okay, we're on those social channels. If you want to connect with us, that would be absolutely wonderful. Okay, if you have missed our previous 17 episodes, you can head over to our YouTube channel and check out the Evolve EdTech playlist. That is where you will find all of our previous episodes right from the very first day in 2024 when we launched Innovative EdTech right up to today. So just head over to our YouTube channel and you will find that playlist there for you. All right. If you haven't heard of this before, we actually have a free annual digital conference because we want to give back to you. And this is one way that we do that. And that is through the Tech Ready Teacher Digital Conference. So we have a conference week each year where all of our new sessions go live, but you can actually access our conference 100% free, 365 days a year. So if you just head over to the techreadyteacher.com, you can register now. You can access 10 sessions from the 2025 conference, and we are just working and finalizing on our 2026 conference. So stay tuned to our social channels because we'll have that announcement coming up very soon. All right, now I know the next slide is going to make me very excited because this is the very first time that I have ever spoken about this in any kind of capacity, any forum, and you are getting it here for the very first time on Innovative EdTech. And we here at Evolve EdTech have been working very hard. It has been a long, long, long journey. It's been an expensive journey. Because I worked with a business coach who is one of my great friends, and we are finally ready to talk about our brand new membership academy, the Tech Ready Teacher Academy. So the Tech Ready Teacher Academy is going to be a membership program where we are going to provide you with so much when it comes to educational technology. We're launching it right now. It's going to be amazing from 2026. We're just finalizing a few more things, but we will have a whole range of different tools and tips and tricks and videos and resources to help you with educational technology because it is the ultimate resource for teachers and educators to help you use, teach, and master EdTech confidently. And we are offering a very special deal at the moment. And this deal is only available until the 31st of January 2026. If you head over to evolveedtech.com/academy, you can subscribe to the Tech Ready Teacher Academy now, and you are going to get a fantastic price as a foundation member. So foundation memberships are now open at $49 per month, and you're going to continue to pay $49 per month for life as long as you stay an active subscribing paying member. But this special price is only available until the 31st of January 2026. On the 1st of February, we are putting the price up. Okay, so if you want this fantastic price of $49 per month, okay, for life, as long as you stay an active subscribing paying member, all right, just head over to evolveedtech.com/academy. We'll be talking more about the Academy on our socials in the coming months, so stay tuned if you want to know more. But if you head over to that particular website there and that web page, you will be able to go and learn about everything you need to know so that you can start being part of our Academy. I am so excited for you to be part of this so that we can continue to share our love of EdTech with you. All right, and we're very close to finishing off, but if you are looking for some free stuff, you can head over to our website, evolveedtech.com/free stuff. We have some videos, we have some workshops, we have some ebooks and templates and things that you can head over and you can access those for absolutely free now. Go and explore it, go and see what's there because we have something that may be of benefit to you. Well, that is it. Thank you so much, everybody. If you have made it through to the end, thank you so much. I really appreciate you for joining us. I know it's almost been an hour and a half, and I do like to talk, and sometimes I waffle, but thank you for sticking with me. I will, continue to get better as we continue to move on. But thank you so much for joining us, for looking at those 5 EdTech tools for gamified learning tonight. All right, our next episode of Innovative EdTech had a bit of a brain fart there. Our next episode of Innovative EdTech is Get Insanely Organized as an Educator with Planboard. So we're going to go and explore a teacher organizer, a teacher diary called Planboard, one of my favorite tools, and I'm going to show you why it might be something that you use to help you get organized, whether or not you're in a country that is just heading back to school, or like us, we're heading towards the end of the school year. Here in Australia, we're slowly limping towards that particular point. But I'm going to talk to you about Planboard and why it is a tool that you might like to investigate to use in the future. So you can join us on Wednesday, the 29th of October, 2025 at 7 p.m. Melbourne, Australia time for episode number 19 of Innovative EdTech. Well, thank you so much again for joining us tonight. Don't forget, if you haven't done so, subscribe to our YouTube channel, please. I'd love to get to like 1,000 subscribers. All right, we're at 299 at the moment, so I would love to make 1,000. Thank you so much for joining us. I know we've had a couple of fumbles tonight, especially with technology and streaming and things like that, but this will head up on and will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel in the Innovative EdTech playlist as soon as possible. Anyway, thank you so much, everybody. Love you, and I can't wait to see what you do with EdTech in the future. All right, until next time, everybody, stay safe, and we'll catch you on the 29th of October for episode 19.